Well, now, how about some memories there?
Oh yes, Alex, Life with Dexter was certainly one of the most popular shows on radio in the 50s. You know, for example, when sponsors' contracts would terminate and the show was taken off the air, it was always returned to broadcast by public demand and with national sponsors such as Commonwealth Bank, Kraft Cheese, you know, all that went on. Willie Fennell was Dexter and I was the original Jessie, the wife. It was a sort of Blondie and Dagwood family show, which had been very popular in the United States. You see, what had happened was that Ron Beck, who was the former executive producer of the big Colgate-Palmolive unit, had gone into production with his own company. So he imported scripts of Blondie from the United States and produced Australian versions of them with Willie playing Dagwood Bumstead. But threats of legal action from the United States brought this to an abrupt end. So Bill decided to write his own situation comedy about an Australian family, possibly sharing some similarities with the Bumsteads, with Bill playing the rather put-upon husband and I the straight woman to Bill's character. So, oh, by the way, Bill and 2GB producer Harry Harper, they cast the show. And they were having discussions about it over coffee concerning the casting of the small son, Ashley, played by Ray Hartley.
Right.
You see, Ray was, well, he was legendary, a consummate actor in a very special category. You see, his voice had never broken, though he was a mature man, so he was able, in the huge industry of radio drama, to play any boy's roles, classic, comedy or drama. He was great, absolutely. Well, when Bill told Harper that he wanted Ray for the small son, Harper said, "Well, you can't have him." "Why?" said Fennell, to which Harry Harper replied, "Because he's lost at sea." Well, there was a lot of publicity about this at the time. You see, Ray was a great fisherman, and he was lost at sea in a small boat with some mates. Well, Fennell didn't know, or rather hadn't heard, and when told by Harper, he was absolutely devastated. Ray and his mates were eventually saved, though at the moment of Bill being informed about the loss of Ray, he was so upset he just got up and walked out of the cafe in tears, leaving his cup of coffee and poor Harry Harper to pay the bill. Yes, Ray told a marvellous story about the saving of him. Would you like to hear it?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, now, he said the seas were huge and he and his mates kept soaking rags in sump oil and lighting them as an SOS signal, you see, from the only box of matches on board. And the waves would drown the flames each time they lit an oil-soaked rag, until eventually only one match was left, which Ray had hidden under a tarpaulin with him. And he tells, I think this is absolutely marvellous story, he tells of a heavenly voice which came to him, loud and clear, which said, "Light the match, Ray, it'll be all right." Which he did. The flare was lit and wasn't extinguished, and they were saved. Now, the strange thing was that the captain of the Dutch ship which rescued them, the Jabatic, I think it was, sitting in his cabin, heard a voice also, telling him to change course. Yeah. And the voice kept coming to him and was so insistent that he ordered the crew to change course immediately, much to their puzzlement. The course was changed, and the Dutch ship almost collided with the Hartley boat as the flare went up. So Dexter and Jessie got their little son, Ashley, through a miraculous event.
There you go.
There you go.
Now, what about the daughter, Amber May?
Well, Amber May, she was Janie the daughter. In real life, she was the only child of Lawrence H. Cecil.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yes. She was the only child of Lawrence H. Cecil, who was a producer and an actor.
My word.
Janie the daughter, Rosalind Kennedale, who was also an actress and a writer. The two next-door neighbours, of course, Clara and K.G. Wilmot, they were played by two absolutely superb performers, Neva Carr-Glynn, or Nessie, as we used to call her,
right,
and Kevin Brennan.
Yes. Yes.
So we went on our way rejoicing that the show Life with Dexter gave so much pleasure to so many people for so many years.
It did indeed. And of course, Willie Fennell was quite an astute businessman, keeping
Oh,
the rights.
was he ever? Yes.
You know, he held
Yes, he
those
was.
rights. And was he a good guy to work with, or did you have fun working with him? Very funny man, I'd imagine.
No, I've worked with a lot of very top comedians, you know, both here in Australia and in England, very top ones. Mm-hmm. And none of them have a sense of humour. Mm. It's absolutely a fact.
Interesting.
Mm.
Interesting.
Roy, you know, I worked with Roy Reen, Mo, and Roy had no sense of humour. And but he would just walk on stage and look at the audience, they'd go through the roof, because something within him emanated this tremendous, masterful talent that he had. He was a comedian. I'll tell you a funny story about Roy. You know,
Sure.
he was very blue comic.
Oh, yes.
And he said to me one day, "Peg, have you seen the latest show at the Tiv?" I said, "No, Roy, I haven't." "Oh," he said, "God, it's blue." He said, "I couldn't take Sadie and the kids." That's true. Because he used to adore his family.
Yes, Sadie Gale, wasn't it?
Sadie Gale.
Now, so we do these productions, and then all of a sudden, television hits in 1956.
Yeah, and radio dropped away.
Huge effect on radio,
Yeah.
and I assume a huge effect on all of the people involved in it.
Well, yes, there was, work became less and less and less, and and television hadn't established. There was no work for people in television as yet. So I thought, well, what does one do? One goes and gets experience in television. So I had put my daughter through business college, and I sent her to my family in Melbourne.
Right.
And in 1959, I took an 11-year-old boy. I didn't tell anybody until the last minute that I was going. I went to London. And I can remember Mayne Linton, who was married to Nancy Stewart. When he found out, he said, "Oh, Peggy dear, I believe you're going to London." He said, "You're taking your small boy." He said, "You know, that's a terrible mistake." He said, "He'll hold you up." Well, he did. He did. Yes. Oh, we had a wonderful, I mean, the world just opened up to us, you know, because we took the step. We were unknown.
Yes.
Well, I was unknown in London, of course, and did all sorts of odd jobs to get the rent in.
You did some theatre work in London?
In London, yeah, I was very fortunate.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, my first I did 2 West End shows. The first one was with Dame Flora Robeson. And because I couldn't get an agent, you see. When I went there, I was so unknown.
Right.
And now this was another thing where my intuition came to my aid. I woke up one night with the name John Gaudry ringing around my head, and I thought, that's funny. Now, John Gaudry was an Australian actor then living in New York, and he'd played one of my Jimmy Olsen's in Superman,
Right.
which I did with Leonard Teale, as you know. And because I was Lois Lane for years, I screamed a lot. And anyway, I thought, well, I don't know why John Gaudry's name is screaming at me, but I'll get up and write him a letter. So I got up 2 o'clock in the morning and wrote John Gaudry a letter and said, "Have you ever thought of coming to London?" He wrote back by return of post and said, "It's funny that I should get your letter when I did, because it's made a decision for me. I'm coming to London." Well, it was through John Gaudry that I got an agent. He had a luncheon appointment with one of the biggest agents, whom he knew from Australia,
Right.
in London, and he said, "There's an actress here in London that you really should see." The agent rang me in the afternoon of their luncheon, and I went down to see him, and by the evening I had an agent. And he was one that brought me into the West End with Dame Flora Robeson.
Do you remember the show?
I do. It was called Time and Yellow Roses. And it was, actually, it was written for Vivian Leigh, but Vivian was coming on a tour of Australia, and so they cast Flora in it. And she was a wonderful actress and wonderful to work with. I only had I had a big scene, only the one scene in the show with Flora, and she just gave. She gave it to me, you know. She was that
It's
good.
good when you've got someone like that.
Oh, absolutely tremendous.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Superman before, and we haven't touched on Superman.
No.
And Lois Lane.
Lois.
Why don't we just have a small grab of Superman?
Oh, terrific.
And we can talk a little bit about that if you'd like.
All right.
Here we go.
Superman. And now, Superman. Mighty being from space, stronger than steel, free to roam the world on his lone patrol for the benefit of mankind. Superman, in his guise of Clark Kent, finds himself unable to reveal his true identity and so forestall disaster as he, Lois Lane, and young Ralph Marlowe wait for Matt Goulden's deadly trap to be sprung.
Ralph, when did Goulden say the logs would be started downriver?
In less than half an hour, Mr. Kent. And if they jam up here, the whole shack will be swept away, with us in it.
But why? The shack's on the bank of the river.
We're less than 10 feet from the water, Miss Lane. And when logs pile up, they go everywhere. They shoot up on the bank as much as 100 feet sometimes.
And with Goulden arranging the jam, we'll certainly be in their path.
That's right, Mr. Kent. Unless we get out of here in a hurry, we won't have a chance in the world.
Unaware that they were being led into a trap, Clark Kent and Lois Lane had followed Matt Goulden to an abandoned timber camp on the edge of a river some distance out of town. They were hoping Goulden would lead them to young Ralph Marlowe, whom they believed could help solve the secret of Stone Ridge. However, no sooner had they found Ralph than Goulden reappeared gun in hand and bound Kent, Lois, and Ralph securely to chairs in the rickety old shack. A shack which would certainly be swept away in a log jam which Goulden had already arranged. Now, as precious moments tick away, Kent tries to think of some way to free himself, some way to resume his true identity of Superman and save Lois and Ralph from death.
If only I wasn't right in front of them. If only they couldn't see me, I could clean up this mess in a minute. There must be some way. There must be.
How long have we been here, Clark? Clark!
Sorry. What did you say, Lois?
I asked you how long we've been here.
About 10 minutes.
That means in 20 minutes the logs will start rolling downriver.
And how long before they get here?
Not very long. The current's pretty strong and the camp's only a mile or two upstream.
I can't understand how Goulden can arrange for the jam here.
Oh, it's easy. The river's narrow here and not too deep. Anchor a couple of logs in the middle and the rest will pile up against them. Matt used to be a timberman before he started working for Cass Striker. He knows all the tricks.
Listen, Ralph, exactly what...
Superman. Len Teal and the announcer Frank Bennett.
Frank Bennett, lovely man.
And Len Teal, lovely to work with.
Oh, divine. Just divine.
Yeah.
Len was very careful with the scripts, always. Anything he did, he'd go through them with a fine-tooth comb to see that there was nothing that would upset the children, or sort of offend them, which is, I think, a good thing to do, and they're starting to wake up to that now.
To his credit, yes, indeed, my
absolutely,
word.
Absolutely.
And you would have been Lois for many, many...
Well, yes, I
long
was
time?
Lois Lane, I think.
Pretty much the way
yeah,
through.
all the way through, yes.
Fabulous. It's great. I used to lie there as a kid listening to it, shivering sometimes. Did you? Now, we're coming to the end of our session, and I just wanted to briefly touch on television work in Australia. Have you done much TV work
Yes,
here?
when I came back in 1965, after I'd done a lot of television in England,
the UK.
I went straight into a show for Channel 2, Lane End, I think it was called.
All right.
The actors used to call it Stone End. I don't know why, it was quite good. But what had happened, Lyndall Barber had been playing the part of the old granny, Greek granny, and she'd got sick and they'd had to put her into hospital, and I went in overnight. They sent for me in I think it was Melbourne, because it was done in Sydney.
All right.
And they rang my agent, June Cairn, and they took me up to Sydney, and I had to learn the script overnight because they were filming the next day.
Yes.
So I was met at the plane by the producer with the script in his hand. And
Right.
shoved it into my hands, and I had to learn it overnight.
So was television, did you find it, moving to TV away from radio, did you find it easy to do or to adapt?
Oh, yes. Oh, well, you do adapt because it's a different, I mean, radio is different, stage is different. And it's all...
You seem to have
it's a
handled
mental
all of
thing.
those mediums quite easily.
Well, yes, I'm pretty,
Now, the last thing I want to play you is when we were talking on the telephone, I mentioned about White Coolies, which was that wonderful
Yes.
series adapted by Gwen Friend.
That's right. I was talking to Gwenny the other day.
The
as a matter
books
fact.
of Sister Jeffries. Well, a friend of mine gave me this final episode of White Coolies, and you're definitely in it. So
Isn't that amazing? I have no memory of it whatsoever.
This one, the Australasian Radio Productions who produced it flew Sister Jeffries up there for the final episode.
Yes,
and Fifi Van Baard, who was the producer,
Yes,
introduces all of the people who had been in it.
Dear
And
Fifi.
of course, you're there. And I think we can play this, and this will be the last grab we play, but just have a memory of White Coolies. I know our friends out there listening land will enjoy this too.
Good. Okay.
April 1955, Sydney.
Oh, come in, Miss Jeffrey. Did you have a good flight?
A bit bumpy, thanks.
Well, after the things you've been through, I don't suppose that would worry you. May I introduce Miss Friend?
How do you do, Miss Jeffrey?
How do you do?
She's the one who will adapt the book.
There's just one thing I want to say before we go any further. I started to keep a diary in camp to give me something to think about at first. Then it became a sort of account of events. But it's about all the girls. Don't you make any bleeding little hero out of me.
February the 28th, 1956.
I sincerely hope I haven't done anything in the adaptation of White Coolies that's gone against the grain. In every way, I've tried to be faithful to the book and to what I knew about the girls, the real White Coolies. In letters to me, Betty Jeffrey has said, "I bet you'll be glad when Coolies comes to an end." I'm not glad. It's one of the saddest things that's ever happened to me.
The production of White Coolies has been a challenge to me. A show that is written by a woman, adapted by a woman, produced by a woman, played by a nearly all-woman cast, is unique in radio. A show that has made even the most hardened of us cry real tears at the microphone is unique anywhere. We have subtitled ourselves Wet Coolies. A show that has the author in the studio on the last day of production to meet her cast is history. May I present Sister Betty Jeffrey.
Hello, Miss Van Baard.
Welcome, Miss Jeffrey. And now I would like you to meet your radio White Coolies.
Yes, I'd like to, thanks.
Right. First, Sister Blanche.
Diana Perryman.
Sister Delphos.
Peg Christensen.
Sister Doyle.
Moira Redmond.
Sister Greer.
Molly Clark.
Sister Gunther.
Cornelia Harvey.
Sister James.
Queenie Ashton.
Sister Trotter.
Wynne Nelson.
Sister Woodbridge.
Joan Lander.
Sister Hannah.
Laurel Mather.
Sister Ashton.
Barbara St. Ledger.
Sister Bullwinkle.
Margot Lee.
Sister Harper.
June Salter.
Sister McElnay.
Diana Davidson.
Sister Short.
Marie Austin.
Sister Smith.
Pat Crocker.
And as Sister Betty Jeffrey,
Ruth Cracknell.
How do you do?
How do you do, Sister Jeffrey?
Miss Cracknell, I've wanted so much to meet the one that played me.
And I've wanted to meet you. I only wish that it wasn't the end of Coolies. I think I speak for all the cast when I say we're going to feel very lost. I know I feel as if part of me is gone.
I would like to say to you too, Miss Cracknell, and to the whole cast, and the technicians, and to Miss Banvard and Miss Friend, that while I've listened to the show in Melbourne, it hasn't just been listening to a play from my book. I've felt the same old feelings all over again. I think that you must all have been there with us because you've made it all so real. Thank you all very much. I'd also like to thank ARP for making it possible for me to be here for this last episode of White Coolies.
Thank you, Sister Jeffrey.
Well, there you go, Peg. You were in White Coolies.
I certainly was.
A lot of names there that you would have
yes.
worked with and remember.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Some sadly no longer with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'd like to thank you very much for giving us your time.
Oh, Alex, it's been my pleasure.
I know that you're a busy lady still, and we're very grateful for your time here at Golden Days Radio, and rest assured that we'll be playing more of the productions with you in over the coming years.
That's very nice of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you once again. I've been talking with Margaret Christensen.